Hello, I'm Ed and I'd like to welcome you to our podcast series, Tackling It Together, brought to you by Little Blackbird, where we will be having open, honest and important conversations with some inspirational guests. Hello and welcome to the Little Blackbird Tackling It Together podcast, and here we are back at Chester Rugby Club for this episode with the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Shotton. How are you doing?
Very well, very well.
Thanks for your time. I know you are a busy man, but I'm pretty excited to have this conversation with you today. I was talking to a pal the other week and he said, right, podcasts look great, who have you got lined up? And I said, and it was a lad that you met last year, Chris, when they came down here and did a game. Yeah. And I said, I've got Mark from Looseheadz. He said, oh yeah, I remember Mark. He said, you know him well, don't you? And I said, you know what? I don't. But I said, you know what, Chris? I feel as though I've known him a long time. I said, we have a bit of a connection. So when I suggested about this podcast and you said yes, I was quite excited. So I'm excited to see where it goes because I know you're an open book. So let's start off. How are you doing?
I'm good. I've just come back off the best part of 3 weeks cruising around the South China Sea. So somebody's got to do it.
The one thing I was going to ask, I was going to say, you like your holidays, where have you been? So what was good about it?
My overwhelming feeling was we spent most of our time in Vietnam, and you go to places that sometimes when you go, I don't know, Spain or America or wherever, and I don't know if anyone's a bit like me, you sort of think, could I live here? And yeah, I could live here, I could live in California. Why do I not live in California? I couldn't live in Vietnam. I'd survive 10 minutes. But I was just struck at the, I just felt so small and insignificant. And the tour guide who took us there said, don't be alarmed at the traffic. There's 10 million people live in Hanoi and 10 million of them, all of them, have a bike. And they're just whizzing. So there's young girls who are 14, 15, no crash helmets. They're like fish. They just get on with it. And I'm thinking, crikey, you do that back in my hometown, there'd be fights.
It's a health and safety nightmare. So, you obviously, tell us a little bit, so we know you are one of the co-founders of Looseheadz, a charity that I've been lucky enough, and we've been lucky enough as Little Blackbird to work together, to work collaboratively over the past kind of 18 months. Just tell us, for people who might be watching or hearing, tell us a little bit about Looseheadz, when it started, and what do Looseheadz do?
Yeah, so the concept's, I think, quite simple. But in order to explain what it is, I probably need to explain how we got there. So I've played rugby all my life. I was flung a high ball age, probably 8 or 9 years old, in Widnes, not far away. Rugby league, loving town. Weirdly, being brought up in Widnes, rugby league, rugby unit didn't really matter. The margins were very blurred. It was just about playing with your mates, and it has been about playing with my mates forever. And I'd played all over. I'd gone to university in Manchester. I went from Manchester to London for 5 years, came back up to Wilmslow. So I've played at lots and lots of clubs and pressed that rugby Freemasonry button quite a lot, where you join a club, you make a tackle, which is expected, you buy your own round, which is mandatory, and you get on with it. And within 6 weeks, you've got 40 mates straight away.
That's the handshake, isn't it?
And that's it. And you're in. And as long as you keep your nose clean, you'll soon find out if you don't fit in. But I was fortunate enough to, having been brought up in Widnes, you learn how to make a tackle and you learn how to buy your own round. So I got to the point in life, I'd got to my 50th year and I'd made my mind up that I was going to retire. It's quite a private thing. I was never a big boot cleaner. I was never a big trainer, if I'm honest. I enjoyed the Saturday. I loved the Saturday. I didn't just enjoy it. I absolutely loved for it. I lived for the Saturday. Tuesday and Thursday were part of the deal, but not the big deal. But that season, I'd got myself reasonably fit, and I thought, well, I'll just privately just burn my boots. We never do we? None of us have ever burned our boots. We always sneak on for another game. We did a few months ago. But at that last day, it was a series of lasts. And what actually happened was, I can't recall whether we won or lost. It doesn't really matter. I played with a few of my mates. I came into the change room. You have a shower, you pack your bag. It's the last time I'll do this properly. I dump my bag near the bar, walk in, get myself a drink, come out. It was a day like today. It was a lovely April day. And on my journey to find my little gang of mates, I passed 3 or 4 blokes that I'd known for probably 25 years who'd really struggled. Lads who'd come up to me and said, things aren't going great at work, or can we have a coffee this Tuesday? Yeah, sure, of course. And I found myself having that coffee maybe 10 years ago thinking, what have I got to offer these lads? And it was on that day, that fateful day when I was 50, 2017, where things conspired, where I just realised that if I had a legacy to leave to the game that I'd played forever and had given me 100 mates and 1 million memories, it wasn't standing in a mudded field with a tracksuit on, passing on bad habits. I don't think I'd make a great coach. And it wasn't being a committee man. I don't think I'm that compliant. But it absolutely was looking after the people that I felt that rugby had looked after, me being one of them, if I'm very honest. And that thought conspired, that instant, actually we need to make this feeling of togetherness more overt than just something that's accidental. And that was the germ of the idea that started a conversation between my son Rob, Dave Nichol, who I'd played with on that day, and myself. And it was the year of the Lions in New Zealand. So 2 or 3 weeks later, we were back at 7 o'clock in the morning with a pint of Guinness, as you do, watching the game. And the conversation came back. And then 2 weeks later, the second test, we're doing the same thing. And I often say, and I think there's some sense in it, and it's not a romantic notion, that Looseheadz found us. I was under the impression, the distinct impression, that the RFU, being what the RFU are, they would have done something, there'd be some sort of initiative to address the mental fitness of everybody involved in a community thing like a rugby club, the greatest institution known to man, in my opinion. And I was a bit shocked to find that the RFU hadn't got onto that, and nobody else had really got onto that. And I now know it's quite tricky. It is very tricky. And more than that, there's been plenty of occasions during 2017, 18, 19, of course, then into lockdown, where, quite frankly, Rob and Dave and I have looked at each other and thought, this is just too much trouble. But instantly you're reminded of the suicide rate, especially for me within young adults, but it's an adult thing as well. But I'm struck at the amount of young 14, 15, 16-year-old, mostly young men, who take their own life, and yet they're a part of a rugby club. And there was something there to save them, maybe. And shouldn't we be playing that over and over again? And shouldn't we implement that into a rugby club, like we have a first team coach, like we have a physio, like we have someone who works behind the bar? Shouldn't we just have mental health, mental fitness? And I think the difference between the two is a cigarette paper. Shouldn't we have that on our agenda? And that's what we've done. We are, and I say it to you quite a lot, we are genuinely making this up as we go along. We've made a few.
I don't know whether I'm, but you've dropped that a few times with me. You don't know what we're doing. We're just making it up.
We've had a few successes, and we have had a bag full of failures, as every business should. And we treat it like a business, because if it wasn't a business, it wouldn't get off the ground. It would just wither on the vine. And it would just be a hobby that went wrong and we could forget about it. I owe it to the people, the 6 or 7 blokes I saw that day back in 2017, the lifetime of memories I've got, the lads who I still see wobble a bit mentally. I owe it to them to keep going. Wherever we go, we don't really have a destination in mind. If we save one life and we never know about it, that's good. And that's what we want to do.
And is that what the driver is for you? Because we go back to this. I knew you'd bring it up. But you have said a few times, we're just making it up as we go along. So I've always thought you maybe don't know necessarily what you're doing or where you're doing or where you're going or how you're doing it. But what's clear to me and clear to everyone is that you and Rob and Dave, you have a very clear why. And you're starting to allude to that. So if we were looking at what is the driver, you've mentioned that a couple of times. I owe it to the people that have looked after me, or you always mention the game, this wonderful game. Just try and tell me a little bit more. What is that fundamental why for you that gets you up? And because I know you juggle this, you juggle work, you juggle things on a daily basis. What is your key why, your key driver?
That's interesting. I think if I'm being brutally honest, it's probably two things that are maybe unrelated. One is a deep, deep, deep love and a love affair with the game of rugby. So I can't stress that enough. I feel lucky and privileged to have been in a very good school that became into a very good club that brought me up in the right way. And believe me, at 17, I was probably facing that which way now thing that all 17-year-olds do. It's a very dangerous age. And it was the rugby club and the mentors I had then, coaches, they dressed up as coaches, but they were life mentors, that showed me a way to behave, showed me a way to act. And that Freemasonry of rugby that has existed throughout my life and will always exist, it's a very real thing. You walk into a club like Chester, you walk into a club like Wilmslow, I could mention 100 others. You join a community and you're readily accepted. That is massive. I think that community spirit is something, if we could bottle it and sell it, we'd make a fortune. And we don't want to make a fortune, we just want to make sure we save the people within it. And so there's that going on, that deep love affair with rugby, and my absolute need, and it's not a desire because that's a bit flaky, it's a need to put something back into a game that's given me everything. You know, we've all been injured and sometimes injuries play with our heads, but rugby has a way of sucking you back in and making it all okay. Don't get me wrong, you walk into a rugby club that you're a member of and you're a little bit too cocky and a bit too big for your boots, the lads will soon knock you down. Equally, you walk in, work's a bit rubbish, your relationships with people might be a bit, you walk in on the floor, they'll soon pick you up, those very same people. There's an antenna, a unified antenna. So that's a big part of it. The other thing about it is in my life, I've found myself in various junctures fixing broken things. And I take a great delight in fixing broken things. I think it's my duty. And whether that's being the fourth child of four in a family, so I had to fight for everything, and you know, I never got a new bike and I never got a new this, and a chip on my shoulder grows bigger. Whether it's that, whether it's just circumstance, whether it was being the privilege of being captain of a very successful rugby team when I was 17 and then 18 and then 19 and then going off to university and captaining that team and going down to Staines and being captain down there. I don't know if I was the greatest captain. I absolutely wasn't the greatest player. I certainly wasn't the best player on the pitch. But I was conscious that I was able to fix broken things. And I was conscious that sometimes it needs a heavy hand and sometimes it needs a light touch. And I think with Looseheadz, it became very obvious to me almost in an instant that this had to be a certain way and we needed to treat it a certain way and we needed to behave a certain way. And I've spent most of my professional career at work avoiding work by trying to say no. I think it's what we do. We get conditioned to it. You know, we haven't got the time to do that, so we'll just say no, 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 maybe, no, no, yes, maybe, no, no, no. No to yes is a ratio of probably 5 to 1. With Looseheadz, absolutely definitely, maybe because I was 50 and I thought there's less to come than there has been. I made a conscious decision to say yes to everything, which took us down blind alleys, don't get me wrong. But I said yes to absolutely everything. And within 3 years, doors are opening that we had no right to open. More latterly, through just putting one foot in front of the other, saying yes, being slightly adventurous in our thoughts and our thinking and how could this go. We've been hugely privileged to now be the official charity partner of the British Lions for their tour to Australia. the way I'm built is that's not Australia, that's Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. So in effect, I'm planting a tree which will grow and I won't be around to enjoy the shade underneath it. But that is the way I am. And is it the best thing I do? Comfortably, it's the best thing I do.
We just had a little chat before, because I'm interested to understand that when you made that decision at 50 to retire.
Yeah.
So that day you've just spoke about, from 50 onwards, must have been, what, 20 years ago was that? From 50 onwards, I'm interested to know that decision that you made at the end of the bar with the boys that day, what has that done for your growth post playing rugby?
Oh, yeah. And that's, and therein lies the sort of background to why I think Looseheadz found us. It probably more me than Dave and Rob. Dave and Rob now work in it full time, and I'm privileged to be able to support that as chairman of the trustees. A job I take, or a vocation I take very seriously. I think for me, I've seen a lot of people, a lot of mates who tend to be defined by the job title they have. And I don't deny that I wasn't one of those people. You know, the first thing you say, what do you do? And you start talking about your job. Actually, what defines us is who we are. It's not the number on our back, it's the way we interact with the players we're playing with in a rugby sense. It's not the job we do, it's how we want to be remembered in that. And I think for me, the Looseheadz experience, it's the first thing I talk about when someone says what I do. And believe me, if they're willing, I will bore the hind leg off them all. Is it too grandiose to say it's given me a new purpose in life? Probably, but it has given me. I'm immediately struck at the fact that, as I said earlier, I felt that the RFU and the other authorities who run rugby should have been doing this before us. Wonderful to discover nobody was doing it, and then to discover actually the reason they're not doing it is it's quite tricky, this stuff. But my belief in what we're doing and the environment we're doing it within has allowed me to meet people like you, who've offered your services without condition and said, I get it. And just one tiny example of that, we concluded that if we were going to build this thing to last, we needed a figurehead for Looseheadz, the charity, which it's now sort of gaining traction. And we concluded that with my great age, one of the people that I'd rubbed shoulders with in a rugby sense was Shaun Edwards. So Dave and Rob said, well, over to you then, you need to phone him. So I phoned him and I said, hello, Shaun, don't get me wrong, we don't live in each other's pockets, but if Shaun Edwards is your mate, you kind of follow his career. My career went one way, his went another. And I said, look, Shaun, we've got this idea. We want to promote mental fitness within rugby. We're not absolutely certain about what that looks like, but I think we do know between you and me. And I want you to do me the great honour of being the patron of it. And the phone went quiet. And 10 seconds on the phone to Shaun Edwards with silence is an eternity. And I'm thinking, I had one job. How am I going to tell Rob and Dave? And who else have we got in there? Who else can we ask? And he just said, and he said the beautiful thing, which I often remind him of, which was, yep, I get it, I completely get it. You and I wore the same colours once, I'm in. And that's what you get from rugby people. You get this unconditional, I get it, even if they don't get it. But they do get it. And if you get 1, 2, 5, 12, 15, 200, 3,000 of you, you can make a big difference. And if actually, you know, if the only thing that Looseheadz stands for is to allow broken-nosed grey old fellas like me to say, if it's good enough for me to have a mental health strategy and a mental fitness strategy, and it's good enough for me to have bad days and good days, then it's okay for the 15-year-old in the under 15s thinking, I don't fit in at school as I used to, you know, work's homework's getting harder, where am I going? It's okay for us not to know. It's okay. It's absolutely okay for us to have a bad day, because the good days will come.
And that's resilience, isn't it?
Yeah.
The resilience to keep going. I did a session here a couple of weeks ago with the kids, and I think I was with the under-14s doing a wellbeing session, and we talked about well-being and the four pillars, the physical side, the mental side, the continuous learning and the connection. A little lad said, oh, so I get it. Even if I'm having a bad day and I come here, it might make me feel better. Or if I keep coming back, or I might just connect with someone. And they all start, you could just see the penny drop, that they think, it's not so much the game, it's just keeping that connection ball in there. I've just got to be here. Yeah. Sometimes I just need to put the trainers on, put the boots on and be in that environment. And that goes back to what you were saying, I've got to open that door to see what the potential is. Yeah. So, 6 years down the line from that idea, 6, 7, how long Looseheadz been going? 7 years. How does it feel when you're seeing, so I watched a video the other week of a young girl from Wrexham, I think, saying that fundamentally she believes that Looseheadz saved her life.
Yeah.
From that vision at the end of the bar to that, how does that land with you?
Well, how can that not hit you about here and realise? And maybe things did, I do jest that we're making it up as we go along. We are making it up, but we've done a few things. When people come and validate what we've done by saying that, and I think more than that, what she said was, I'm out of touch with the young generation, having been a youngster, and my kids look at me sometimes and go, really, Dad, do you not know how to use a phone? You shouldn't be allowed a phone. But I think she was 18, and she said, I went onto Instagram to say my final goodbyes, and cracky, this is a life we're talking about. And the first post I saw was a Looseheadz post about not giving up. And then I didn't give up, and we've saved a life. That just takes your breath away. And comfortably the best thing I do because of things like that. And they're not isolated, they're all unique. The brave ones are the ones who tell their story, but they're no less brave in another sense from the ones who just find Looseheadz and say, no, I'm going to change my habits and I'm going to look after myself. And it's when I think we as human beings start looking at ourselves for the answers rather than externally, is when we start growing. It's all inside us to be that quest for eternal happiness, that elusive state of happiness, whatever it might mean to me or you or anybody else. It's in us to find it. And it's okay not to know it. It's absolutely okay not to know the answers.
You see that a lot now, Johnny. I definitely think with the work you're doing, the work we're doing together, it's very easy to look from the outside in. So to be big, to really go to the gym. Now we'll come into a club and there'll be a protein shake before a pint. But now I see there's a real movement that with the work that you're doing and highlighting the growth that is needed in people. People are actually looking from the inside out and actually questioning, is everything all right in there and in there? And if not, reaching out, whether that would be to a coach or a colleague, and that's the opportunity. We've spoke about this previously. Where does rugby sit with that? What role does rugby, specifically, maybe over other sports, what role does rugby have in that, in trying to change those horrendous statistics that we've got?
Yeah. We're not blind to the fact, while we might have proved the concept, if you like, if that's not too much of a grandiose term again, that this thing, Looseheadz, works within a rugby environment. I'm not blind, and we're not blind to the transferability of the principles. And they're hugely. How we do that, I don't know. But as Woody Allen famously once said, 90% of success in life is just turning up. And if it's just about consistency, we'll find a way. We'll find a way of making that transferability work to maybe where I work, where you work, where anybody works. Because the concepts aren't unique. It's about looking after ourselves, but it's actually looking after ourselves using the influence of a community around us. And I know I've been, I bask in the sunshine of the 200 mates I've got at Wimslow Rugby Club. And one of the phrases that I'm reminded of fortunate enough, my eldest son played, Rob, who's now involved in Looseheadz, and he played football up until he was 14, and then, I'll probably say this advisedly, he saw the light and decided to go and join the rugby club, which I was secretly absolutely delighted about.
Oh, bet you were.
So I was behind the shed like this. And I went down and put my tracksuit on because it was the right thing to do. And I coached those lads from 14 to probably 18, 19, and then they drift off to university. And now they're all sort of 28 years old, and they come back and they tell me the phrase I used in the October and November and December of the season, but it's also relevant to every part of our life. You don't win the league in May. You win the league in October, November and December. So what we're doing in October, November and December is we're preparing the ground for our day in the sun. And if we don't put the work in today, we won't have our day in the sun. So get out there tonight and revel in the mud, revel in the wind, revel in the rain, get on with it, walk away with a 6-3 win, get in the car and believe you've put another notch on the banister to say we're having our day in the sun. And that's the consistency thing. I think one of the tricks Looseheadz has to adopt is being consistent with that messaging in rugby clubs. We don't want to ram down people's throats, but I said it before, every rugby club's got a physio, a first team coach, somebody who looks after the fixtures. Why can't we have, and therefore we should have, somebody who's not accountable for every single one of them, but the administrative lead for all the mental fitness work that goes on in that club?
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
And the final thing I probably want to ask is, we call them the little blackbird worms of wisdom. So fundamentally advice. So if you were to give someone a piece of advice, knowing all that you know now in that 57 years of life, what would that advice be? So a phrase I use a lot is, advice is what you seek when you know the answer and you wish you didn't. And I think there's some truth in that. But I think a wizened old broken-nosed fella like me would say to my former 17-year-old, that dangerously aged 17-year-old lad who was getting some things right in life, but most of it was probably going wrong. And I didn't quite know how socially I was fitting in, and everything felt a little awkward. I know now that it will all be okay. It will all be okay. And it will. And to be fair, it has been. And yeah, it will all be okay. It's all okay for all of us. Brilliant. Mark, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for your time, pal.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed Tackling It Together, brought to you by Little Blackbird. If you did, then please hit the subscribe button. Give us a follow on our socials. Little Blackbird Limited. Also, please give us a like and comments on any thoughts that you may have. Let's get these important topics out there and encourage some meaningful, authentic conversations. See you next time. Cheers, and remember, keep smiling.